Today I'm going to show you how to create a new Active Directory domain on Windows Server 2012. It's a little bit different than 2008 R2 and earlier. Before you had dcpromo.exe. In 2008 R2 you got some of the nice PowerShell goodness, and you can still use PowerShell in 2012, but the graphical way of promoting a domain controller is different than it is in the past, so I'm going to walk you through that using Server Manager. So if we go down here and launch Server Manager, ooh, looks like I have some errors. Let's refresh. Those should go away. Okay. And so what we'll do is we will go to Manage, and you need to add a role and feature. Click Next. Click Next again. If you have multiple servers managed by the same server manager, they'll show up here. So just make sure you have the right server selected here. Mine is named 2012-01. And for server roles, we're going to install the Active Directory domain services. Keep this box checked for the management tools because we're going to want those. Click Next. For features, we're going to leave them at the default. You'll notice it installs the Group Policy Management console as well, so that's handy to have. We'll click Next. We'll click Next again, and we will click Install. And then we wait. Okay, so now that that's finished up, you'll notice we have a link right here that says promote this server to a domain controller. If you accidentally close out of here because you're trigger happy, don't worry. You'll notice that the notifications up here, you have a little alert, and from right there you can hit promote the server to a domain controller as well. So either of those links will bring you to the same page. So we'll let that load. Alright, and then we'll minimize Server Manager just to get it out of the way. So we want to add a new forest because this is an entirely new forest. And the name that I'm going to choose is corp.mdmera.com. And you'll notice that my website is mdmera.com. I'm not using the same domain internally as externally. That's against Microsoft's best practices and will cause some DNS issues for your internal users, and it just kind of creates a larger headache than you need to. I've also blogged a bunch of times about why you shouldn't use .local, .corp, .lan, or any of those other made-up TLDs, so avoid that as well. You should use an unused subdomain of your public DNS namespace. So if you have company.com, you should use corp.company.com if that subdomain is not currently in use. So we'll click Next. Okay, and that did take a minute or two to pop up here, so if yours is on a gray screen, just let it sit for a minute or two. I did some video editing here to kind of cut down on the wait time. So you're going to want to fill in a DSRM password here. What that's going to do is if you need to restore your Active Directory for whatever reason, if you accidentally deleted some objects and you didn't realize it till after they got left out of the Active Directory recycle bin, or just for whatever reason you need to go into DSRM mode. So just use a password that you're going to remember, and when you promote more than one domain controller, the DSRM passwords can be different for each one, so make sure they're documented. Also, since this is the first domain controller in our domain, we must install DNS on it, and it's a good idea to run DNS on all of your domain controllers anyway, unless you have a really compelling reason not to. And the global catalog, it has to be a global catalog. Again, it's the first domain controller in the domain. The forest functional level, we'll leave at 2012. Same with the domain functional level. You might need to adjust these if you are going to install domain controllers that are older than 2012 for whatever reason. Your domain functional level determines the version of domain controllers that can be installed in this domain. So when you have it set to 2012, that means that you're locked into 2012 domain controllers. You do get some more features that way, and that's sort of the trade-off. So I always go with the highest possible, and since this is brand new, we're not doing anything older than 2012. So we'll click Next. And we're going to get an error here about a delegation to the parent zone. In most cases, you'll want to create a delegation to your parent DNS zone unless you don't control that DNS server. For example, it's third party, so it's kind of a split Horizon DNS, then you can do some forwarders. You can manually create the delegation. Either way, for me, it doesn't matter. I don't need to create the delegation, but you probably should if you're in doubt. And so for this step, the NetBIOS domain name is what a user logs in with, essentially, when they're doing domain/username. The domain part in the beginning is the NetBIOS name of the domain. So I don't want to do corp, and this is the only time you get to change it without doing a domain rename, so make sure you don't miss the screen. I want them to log in as mdmara/ whatever. You know, in your case, if you're doing corp.company.com, you could change this to company, so they're logging in as, you know, company/ whatever, you know, so that they're logging in with your company name. It's just easier on people's eyes. Executives don't complain about it, so we'll want to take care of that. Click Next. I only have a C drive here. Best practices are to put these on a different drive. In reality, it doesn't matter that much on modern systems, so we'll click Next. And this just sort of gives you a review of everything. And if you want, remember I told you you could do this in PowerShell, you hit this View Script, and it'll actually give you the PowerShell so that this can be repeatable over and over. But we don't need that, so we'll just click Next. And this will give you the prerequisite check, so if you have any missing prerequisites for whatever reason, like if you managed to get to this screen and you unchecked some of the role features that were required, or you know, if you have a reboot pending or anything like that, this is where it will complain about that. And if you notice down here, if you click Install, the server will automatically reboot at the end of the promotion operation. So just kind of let this run for a minute, or 2, or 5. Okay, and you'll see that there are a few errors, well, not errors, I'm sorry, warnings. So this is backwards compatibility with NT4 essentially. This is common, and generally you'll go into group policy and you'll turn this off. And also a delegation can't be created, so that's, you know, again, like I explained earlier, usually not a problem, but if in doubt, create the delegation. And we hit install. Then we wait. Okay, so it just finished, and you'll see I'm about to be signed off in a few seconds. Okay, so now you see that we're back up. That took probably about 5 or 6 minutes to reboot and get all set back up. So when we go to log in, you'll notice the local administrator account that we were using before is now a domain account. There are no local accounts on domain controllers, the only exception being the directory service restore mode account, which is a special case. But any account that was in the local user database is now a domain account. So we can just log back in. And you'll see Server Manager will start back up automatically. We can get rid of that, but now we also have all of the Active Directory tools. We'll open users and computers. It's familiar to a lot of people. And there we go. We have our domain, we have our users, all our built-in groups, all of that. So that's how you make a new Active Directory domain in a new forest using Windows Server 2012.